Something very deliberate is happening in Pittsburgh. And it's not about this season alone. For those watching the Steelers closely, the real story isn't in who they drafted in 2025, but in who they didn't. Despite a well-known need at the quarterback position, the team opted not to select one early in this year's draft. At first glance, it might have seemed like a missed opportunity, maybe even a miscalculation. But the reality is more complex and far more strategic. Behind the scenes, the Steelers appear to be working toward a larger, more ambitious plan that centers not on the present, but on the 2026 NFL Draft, which will be held right in their own backyard. According to Jerry Dulock of the Pittsburgh Post, the team has its sights set on landing a premier quarterback prospect next year. That kind of move doesn't happen passively. It requires serious planning and possibly a trade up the draft board. While Pittsburgh had the 21st overall pick in 2025, it's unlikely they'll pick much higher in 2026 unless things go terribly wrong during the upcoming season. That means if they want one of the top quarterbacks, they'll have to make a move, likely by packaging picks and potentially a key player. Dulock floated a name that raised eyebrows: wide receiver George Pickens. He's young, immensely talented, and undoubtedly one of the Steelers' brightest stars. But that's exactly why he might be seen as valuable trade capital in a blockbuster deal to move up for a quarterback. Trading a player like Pickens would be bold, even controversial, but sometimes bold is what it takes to change a franchise's trajectory. Pittsburgh hasn't had a true long-term answer at quarterback since the prime years of Ben Roethlisberger. The current room, which includes Mason Rudolph and transfer quarterback Will Howard, lacks the ceiling and long-term promise needed to realistically contend for titles in the modern NFL. The Steelers aren't aiming for good enough. They want to contend. And that starts with a quarterback who can carry the franchise into the future. Why the wait until 2026? Because next year's quarterback class is expected to be far deeper and more dynamic than what was available this spring. Among the headliners is Arch Manning, the most famous name in college football, thanks to his lineage, but also a legitimate prospect with poise, arm strength, and leadership. There's also Drew Allar from Penn State, a towering pocket-passing prototype who has drawn comparisons to NFL greats. Lenoris Sellers from South Carolina is making waves with his dual-threat playmaking ability, and Garrett Nussmeier from LSU has flashed enough brilliance to make scouts take notice. These aren't just decent college quarterbacks, they're potential franchise changes. And that's what Pittsburgh wants. However, acquiring one of these top-tier QBs will be no easy task. The Steelers are not projected to finish at the bottom of the standings, which is where teams typically need to be to draft a top quarterback without trading up. That's where draft capital becomes crucial, and Pittsburgh might be in better shape than people think. Thanks to several off-season departures and strategic moves, the team is projected to receive up to 6 compensatory picks in 2026. These include a possible third-rounder from losing offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr., a fourth from parting with quarterback Justin Fields, a fifth from the Russell Wilson transaction, and a 6th-round pick for the departures of players like James Daniels, Dante Jackson, and Najee Harris. While the NFL limits teams to 4 compensatory picks, the Steelers will have options and flexibility, something that becomes invaluable when trying to strike a deal on draft night. In addition to those comp picks, Pittsburgh still owns all of its original selections for the foreseeable future. That's a full cupboard of draft ammunition. If the front office wants to climb into the top 5 or even the top 3 next year, they could very well make it happen. The question isn't whether they have the resources, it's whether they're willing to make the move. Given the direction this team is heading, it certainly seems like they're ready to go all in. Of course, the emotional part of the equation is tough. Trading away a fan favorite like George Pickens, if it comes to that, would be difficult. He's a highlight machine and a young face of the franchise. But teams sometimes have to make painful decisions for the greater good. If that trade helps land a quarterback who can elevate the team for the next 10 to 15 years, it might be worth the price. And with the 2026 NFL Draft taking place in Pittsburgh, the moment would be even more symbolic. A new chapter beginning right at home, in front of a roaring crowd, as the city welcomes in its next leader. Think about the electricity in that room. Thousands of fans packed into Acrisure Stadium or a nearby draft venue, holding their breath as the Steelers trade up. The commissioner steps to the podium and announces a name: Arch Manning, Drew Allar, Lenoris Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, or another young QB with superstar potential. In an instant, the direction of the franchise changes, and it happens on home soil. You couldn't script a better moment for Pittsburgh. Until then, all eyes will be on the team's 2025 performance and on how they manage their draft assets, trades, and player development. Every move from here on out will either support or jeopardize the grand plan. The pieces are in place, the timing is right, and the front office seems prepared to make a leap. Steelers Nation, this could be the calm before the storm. The decisions made over the next 12 months could shape the next 12 years. Keep your eyes on the horizon, because when the 2026 draft arrives, Pittsburgh might not just be the host